Right, here we go. Are you ready and excited and full of exciting things to say? Hurrah, hurrah, hurrah. Hello and welcome to Talkin About. We are talking about Doctor Who Season 1, Series 1. You know, you think I'll be more on it by now. It's Series 1 we're calling it. The season would be an old one, a series is a new one. You can like us, you can subscribe to us. Can you get notifications? Is that the same thing? Do all that. It'll make your life better. If you buy this record, your life will be better. That's what the Tamper said. Do the same for this. I am Paul or P-Bal, and I'm joined by...
Hello, it's James.
And hello, it's Jason.
Hey, the great thing is that although James isn't cosplaying, Jason is as what is in James's photo, so you can see how well he's done it.
We call him Max.
That is not me. Don't start this.
So Jason goes about something. Oh, yeah. Simon Pegg will translate. It's fine. After a few shandy boozes, I think that's what it's like, actually. Just a few octaves up.
I was going to say, actually, that might well be quite true, but that's another story for another day.
Anyway, previously on Doctor Who and the Series 1 talking about rock bottom, tragedies, they've got them. End of the World has got 18.5 points.
Oh.
Just above is Doctor Who and the Aliens of London and Doctor Who and the World War III with 19.5 points. Mid-table, Rose on 20. Our second place is the Unquiet Dead on 22. And our current leader is Doctor Who and the Dalek, singular, on 26 points.
Ooh.
It is all to play for. It is all to play for. There's a lot more to come. And today we are looking at Doctor Who and the Long Game. Yeah. I could be on Legend, I'm telling you.
So butch.
I know. But Doctor Who and the Legend. I don't want to accidentally swear again because that's what happened last time. Anyway.
It's too early in the run.
Method.
It's too early in the run to have a swear word in this series so far.
Unless you want to throw that vase of flowers at yourself again, Jason, because that was smooth.
Oh, that was smooth. I mean, nobody ever noticed. Nobody noticed, I'm sure. I am not touching any flowers today.
Good.
Keep your hands off your flower. Who has an introduction to this episode?
I can start us off if you like.
Jason clearly hasn't because he's very enthusiastic about this situation.
Waving his hand at me as if to say, thank God you're going to open this one.
No, I'm happy for you to open it, James. It's nice to hear your views so early on in the recording.
He's got nothing. He's got nothing.
He's got nothing.
The voiceover man is back. The voiceover man is back.
There's no target books for these stories. So he's like, oh, I've got to write one. Anyway, so we are off to Satellite 5 for Adam's first trip in the TARDIS. And whilst he gets more than he bargained for in a visit to the medical bay, the Doctor is busy checking the plumbing and investigating floor 500, where apparently the walls are made of gold or covered in gold. So yes, it's an interesting one because we were talking about Adam last time, but Adam really wasn't the focus of the story because it was really about the Doctor and the Time War and the Dalek. Whereas now you get to see Adam more centre stage. And in this story, you see it through Adam's eyes. So we've had lots of different perspectives so far. And this time we're seeing it through Adam's eyes. And whilst Adam does take on the companion role, it's not necessarily the traditional companion role because he sees this as an opportunity. He finds himself in the far future. He finds out that Rose has got a phone that can dial back to, current day on Earth. And he discovers that there is a way to tap into lots of information. And his brain puts all of that together and comes up with a scheme as to how to use that to his advantage to send future knowledge back to himself, so he can profit by it. And it's kind of a different take on a companion. Normally the companion is the one that sort of goes along with the Doctor and is in awe of everything. And, you know, there've been a couple of exceptions, like Turlough, for example, who was just trying to kill him for the first couple of stories. But generally you see a different side of a potential companion. And it's interesting how that develops, and the Doctor and Rose's reaction to that. And then aside from that, you've got Satellite 5, you've got Russell T Davies here really writing satire about media and how people, you know, the danger of being controlled by media and believing everything that you hear on the news. And you have a setup, if you like, where that is being controlled and manipulated by a group of bankers, possibly bankers, and the editor. So yeah, that's our starter, if you like.
It's quite spooky, actually, because when you think about what's happened since this episode was broadcast, news medias now, if you think about it, have become very, I mean, they really are big now, aren't they? If you think about, if you take a couple of the networks in America, somebody like Fox, for example, I mean, essentially, that's what we've got. It's manipulation of information to the masses. And it is strange because it wasn't quite like it back then when this was written and made. Very, very interesting observation. And I find that some of Russell's scripts, he is looking into the future and he sees a lot. I don't know whether there's a knack here, but he's, you know, in some of the scripts he's written, particularly years and years, it's, you know, it's so uncannily like what we're living through now. So it's interesting, that take. But it is a satire. And I have to say, before I go into that, Rose just gives everything up far too easily. Just going back to the fact you talked about the phone, you talked about, you know, how easily he was able to sort of get under the skin of this and start to manipulate stuff. Adam, you know, she hands the key over, she hands the phone over, you know, she's very, very trusting right from the get-go. And Adam clearly doesn't, I don't know that he starts out with an agenda, but ultimately ends up being in that situation where he's realized that he can make something of himself off the back of the knowledge and the information. So it's a great exploration of when companion goes bad. And we haven't seen too many examples of that through the years, thankfully, because in all fairness, the Doctor will only travel with people that he ultimately believes that he trusts or has you know, faith in. Hasn't got it wrong that often. I might say he's got it wrong once or twice, but that's another story. But yeah, I mean, it's an interesting story. It's not, for me, this isn't one of the best of the season. I think there's some nice sort of set pieces in there. I like the bit when they land and they're exploring around. It's very akin to going back to the sort of second story of the season where you've got that whole reveal. You walk out and you go into the platform and you see the Earth again. It's sort of like almost a bit of a repeat and a reveal there. You got that bit of business when they open up all the sort of restaurants and it's time to eat. And then, of course, the mystery builds as you go through it. As I said, one of the weaker stories, I think, of the season for me.
Companion-wise, what you say about Adam, I think, is it one of those things where you say, as an ordinary lay person, were you to go into the past or into the future, what are a lot of people going to say that sort of traditional thing of, well, you could work out the lottery numbers and give the lottery numbers back, or you can manipulate a situation to take what you want. And I think it's like Adam doesn't, I don't think, in the setup start out with that. Then when he realizes he can do that, he does do that. And the parallel there comes is that he's condemned for that. Then in the next story, TV's Doctor Who suggests that Rose has played a long game of wanting to build up to the situation where she could go back and which obviously we'll come on to. So I think the parallel there, strangely, is that this episode shows you all the reasons why Adam can't be a companion, but Rose is. But then the placing of Father's Day next shows you that also there's an element of that humanity, that he's probably not entirely bad, but she's got the same characteristic that she carries through to the next week, because she condemns him for this week and all the.
Yeah.
But I think the weird one with this is Russ. That's your friend Jason.
Thank you. I appreciate you reminding me of that.
Russ said that he'd originally sort of pitched this as an 80s story. And I think you can actually feel that because it's got a sort of 80s.
It was a story rejected from the 80s. It was one that was written and then it was rejected. So they went back to it and that's it, because it feels quite classic Doctor Who in the sort of, Doctor and companion turn up on a space station and get involved. But yeah, I believe it was an old story that they rejigged. Oh, sorry. I thought you said it was set in the 80s.
No, I said he pitched it in the 80s. It is set in the 80s. Sorry. Anyway, I suppose you could sort of see the Turlo-Eek thing. I don't know how close it came, or whether he just sent an outline. Either way, they were like, no, darling, you're not suited to this show. How wise they were. But you can see you could imagine the Jagrafest having that line around it where they put the video effect in to have a sort of something above. Because this is it's not a cheap one, but it's not. I don't feel it's a very expensive one by any means. No. There are some others that feel like there's more money, and you're going to get that because you juggle it, don't you? You have a cheaper one to offset it,
especially as they get to recycle the set as well. So you're getting your money's worth out of that. And I find we talked when we talked about End of the World about the CGI budget. This is probably the weakest CGI. I think in so far in this series, because it's just, I mean, it's described. I mean, the Jagrafesh is described as a basically a lump of meat in the ceiling, and I find it really odd. I like Simon Pegg's character. I think he's really quite chilling as the sort of the editor. But the Jagrafest doesn't really add a great deal to it, and I don't think the effects are that brilliant on that.
It's the only story we get directed by Brian Grant as well, isn't it? He doesn't come back for more. I think he tends to do pop videos more. I could be wrong. That might be his sphere. So I mean, I think it's a bright and sort of colourful looking thing. Yeah, I don't think the CGI is that awful on the Jagrafest. I mean, it's nearly 20 years ago.
I don't think it's aged very well at all. I don't remember being a great fan of it when it first aired. You just see it sort of snapping a couple of times from the ceiling, and then it sort of, you have that weird bit at the end where the heat gets to it and it expands and blows up. But I think,
I suppose it's twofold, isn't it? On one hand, you can play off the power of not seeing what's above, and I think when you hear it and you don't see it, it's probably more impactful because you can imagine what it could be. And then when it comes to actually having it in shot, you're then paying per second for how much of it you're seeing to have it animated. So I suppose you've got to be mindful of, I can't have it in every shot, or although ironically, and this just kind of shows the sphere that I come from, it's a blinking expensive cast now because they've all gone on to really good things.
Absolutely.
It's a cracking cast. I mean, you're right. I mean, obviously Simon Pegg's gone off to Hollywood, but you've got Tamsin, you've got
Tamsin Gregg.
Tamsin Gregg.
All over the RSC, darling.
Anna Maxwell Miles.
Oh yeah,
is in this as well. It is amazing cast, and you look back now and go, oh, how much would we want those people to be in Doctor Who now? I think that they did really, really well with the kind. They still do really well, to be fair. You do get some great names that turn up in Doctor Who, but you're starting to see in some of the early stories of season 1 and season 2 some of the real talent that would then go on to do other things and, you know, make real household names for themselves if they weren't already.
Anna Maxwell Martin now for me is so motherland though. So
I
when she does the
know,
manic smile, I'm kind of like, it kind of just maybe she could. Like she's just too motherland for me now. I can see
Yes,
she's that character, so I'm watching her as that, and I'm just thinking she like sometimes she's got to look after the kids or something. So the manic smile. But no, it's interesting because I think again, and you know, I'll put my post up here. I don't dislike this story. I don't wet my bed for it. You don't need a rubber sheet for me. It's kind of like, and it's weird because it's maybe it's because it just feels fairly. I mean, the story itself is all right. They land, they realize something bad's going on, they investigate it, they fix it, they go home. There's not a much in the way of a twist on the plot. But all the actors within it are like we said, you know, are really. It's a really good cast, but it doesn't sparkle for some reason.
I think it also suffers where it falls in the run of stories as well, because it feels like a dip. It's the way I would describe it, without giving too many spoilers for the next story. But it does really feel like a dip in what has been an increasingly, you know, better and better series up until now. It feels like there's a sudden sort of dip, and it's not atrocious. Don't get me wrong. I feel the same as you, but it's not on par where you've got something like Dalek, and then you come to this, and it does feel like you're stepping sideways, but it feels like you're stepping a little bit back as well. And I don't quite know why.
But I mean, equally within the season, it's still quite clever in that Aliens of London, the result of what he does in that is an impact for what happens in Boomtown. The result of what he does in this is what impacts on Parting the Way. So it's clever within the broader arc of the season. It just feels, and again, I say, I sat and I watched it, and I didn't sit there. I wasn't it wasn't like Underworld or something. I was looking at the watch, thinking how much long this is on for. I didn't get bored during it.
Yeah.
I just didn't. I didn't feel, and I know at the time it's like you said, it did feel like a dip at the time. And I know when I used to watch the 3 episodes on a disc. This was one that I'd sort of possibly skip a bit more because it just didn't really grab me. It hasn't quite got that iconic thing, has it? And most of the episodes in this have got an iconic sell, haven't they? If you were doing the episode like a Friends thing, the one with, you could probably pull something out for most of them. Whereas this is sort of the one with the lift and the monster in the roof or something, or the one with Simon Pegg. I don't know. There isn't a Are You My Mummy or the head zip or the Dalek or Charles Dickens and the Ghosts. So there are really punchy kind of headlines that you can do for, I think, pretty much every episode here, and this doesn't quite.
I mean, there was supposed to be more sort of backstory to Adam. There was supposed to be one of his parents was ill, and there was supposed to be more of an emotional setup to why he might choose this course of action. But you don't really get, I mean, a lot of that was cut out. And so you don't get that. So you kind of you see him, like you say, Jason, the way that Rose just sort of goes, here's my phone, here's the key, you see him pick up on all those things and start to sort of put them together. And then he goes off on his own and ends up in the Medibay, etc. But you don't really understand necessarily the motivation why. And it's unusual because Russell T Davies normally is very good at making us love or love to hate characters. He's very good at sort of saying this is the motivation for a character. Whereas I think because Adam wasn't centre stage in the previous one, and now he is in this one, but are we really invested in his character? I'd probably say not. Well, for me personally, not so much. And it's no big shakes that he's not in the next episode. It's the fact that he's sent home doesn't really impact on it for me. I'm not there going, oh, what a shame he wasn't the companion. because he's kind of fulfilled his purpose of saying this is what a companion could do if they decided to, not be Rose. But I don't think there's any more to it.
But how much of that is down to? I mean, you're right. I think this is one that it's a what you'd call a middle of the road episode. It's neither bad nor good. But I'm not convinced that Adam comes across well, because I think there's not much written in the story, as you've said. But I'm not also convinced in the portrayal either. And up against Rose, the characterization isn't there. And to be honest, whilst the character of Adam gets a lot to do, it is quite forgettable. And I can't. I just don't know. I don't know if I just didn't relate or couldn't relate to the character potentially in this, either because the character was essentially turning bad, but I'm not a fan of Adam in the series, so that's probably why I'm a bit modest with it.
Okay. I don't think Bruno's doing too much different to what he used to do on Coronation Street. Actually, I don't think there's a world of difference in the characters there. I think
could that be it though? I wonder if that could be it, because again, I was never really particularly fond of his character in Coronation Street either.
I'm not sure whether you were meant to be fond of his character in Coronation Street, because he was quite a manipulative little tyke in that, wasn't he? Yes, yeah. I think isn't that the point though? Is that he's meant to be pretty and manipulative? Isn't that because Doctor Who says about him being pretty, and Rose makes allusions to him being so the fact that she's happy to hand over the key, hand over the phone. I think people do that for pretty people. I think that's an actual thing. If someone quite pretty gives you a bit of attention, you are quite. Don't you shake your finger at me, Jason Clifford. They have to be pretty for you.
Oh, there was a proper waggle there.
Crikey. I think it's true. If someone pretty asks you to do something, I think you're more inclined than some munter. And I'm sorry that's not politically correct, folks. I think that's a fact of life. But I think that's the character, though, isn't it? That he's a pretty guy that she's meant to sort of fancy, but then, she gets over it quite quickly that she realizes there's not a lot of depth there. But I think that the sort of important point at the end, though, is that, I mean, he's had that horrible thing in which every time someone does that, it's like Jason with the camera on this. It just flicks back.
Don't click your fingers. It might open Jason's forum.
I don't want to know what it would open on Jason if I click my fingers.
Oh no, it's happened. Oh, I should be surfing the dark web now.
Hang on, is that where the Captain Jack rumor went straight to? That info spike.
Oh, you really shouldn't have clicked.
What is that a picture of, James? Please.
Oh,
my brain.
Yes.
Joe, for a second, I was thinking prolapse, but we're okay. It's fine. We're back on brains.
Whoa, let's get back on brand. I love
anyway, the important thing about Adam at the end is that you would expect TV's Doctor Who to forgive him, and that would be part of his, I'm Doctor Who, I'm on a higher moral plane here. You've done bad things, Adam, but we can work on this and you'll be fine. I mean, Turlough spent months trying to kill him, and he was like, do you know what, Turlough? I forgive you. You made the right decision in the end. So you would naturally assume that Doctor Who would be like, don't worry, Adam, you've done the wrong thing this time, but we can learn from this and you'll be a better person. Whereas what he says is, no, I can see that you're a manipulative little tyke, and now you've got this, you're going to have to shut up and stay quiet and never do anything that draws attention again.
It's quite brutal, isn't it? And you start to see, because Rose, very briefly, is like horrified and sort of says, you've got to help him. But then Rose sits there clicking her fingers as well and joins in on it. And I think it's an interesting sort of twist at the end, whereas a couple of times Rose has sort of stood her ground with the Doctor and said, no, you can't do this. This is wrong. She actually sort of goes, yeah, I am. And there's a little bit at the end where he says, I only travel with the best, and that's why I'm with Rose. And you see that look on her face as she goes off into the TARDIS. And it might be a bit of a foreshadowing for the next story, but there is that the two of them now are so strongly bonded.
It's played though. This device that you're now cosplaying is played a little bit for laughs, though, isn't it? In some respects, whilst it's central to the storyline of the sort of the feeding of the information, the whole scene where he goes to the medical bay and gets this fitted, and you've got Tamsin Greig, and you've got that whole sort of bit where he wakes up from the operation. It is that whole thing is being played. There's a lot of comedy in that. That's probably in some respects probably one of the highlights of this episode. It stands out as being one of the better scenes in what we've already said is quite a mundane story. But it becomes comical though at the end, and in some respects, I whilst we've said it is a little cruel of the Doctor to have left him there with that to keep him quiet so that he doesn't do anything in the future. That does play a little bit against the Doctor's natural character. Yeah.
But you do get the wonderful payoff when his mum comes in, just goes, oh, just like that. And it sort of,
I mean, it's a small part for Judy Holt, but that's quite a sweet part. And again, you get character there because you know that she doesn't know when he's coming back. She's not heard from him. He's obviously not very communicative. So like when the first time Rose can phone her mum up, she's like, I must phone my mum, because obviously there's the bond that they talk a lot. Whereas Adam, you then see that he's not. So he wants the phone to leave it. He just wants to know that he can do it. He doesn't want to do it. He wants to know that that's a possibility to do it. And so it's interesting that you see a different sort of dynamic parent-child, and he's got a lovely little dog as well. I think that's another character piece you can all indulge with there.
I do also think when he phones home and sends the information down the phone, I do think that arcing light thing around the phone's a little unnecessary as well. Just to point to the phone and tell us that the information's coming down, would it really do that? I'm just going to say that.
Well, you'll have to tell Russ you don't approve.
Well, don't you worry.
But like the comedy scene with where and he vomits up his little ice cube of kiwis or whatever. But I like that sort of that play for that. You have the one thing, but technology advanced that you'd have the anti-vom thing or whatever popped in as a complimentary upgrade. It's just nice.
Tamsin's face throughout the whole of that. She has such brilliant comic timing, and just the way she looks at him and looks at it and just goes, "Oh yeah, we installed the Vomitomatic." I just love her part in this. It's such a shame. It's this reasonably small part, but she is so good.
But it's almost like she's sending herself up.
Yeah,
she's got that sort of just that edge of sarcasm. There's just something about it. It's as I said, the scene for me, or that series of scenes, probably the highlight of the episode.
So whilst you've had your info spike in, have you downloaded anything from the dark web you'd like to share with us?
Let's have a look. So you were just talking about the frozen vomit. So you're right. It was kiwi and orange was in the ice cube that he threw up. Does anyone want to have a go at saying the full name?
The mighty something Jagraphic something.
I have to confess, Jason and I both tried to do the full name previously. And it was almost as funny as watching him try and say Slitheen.
I can't say that. I can't say it, so I'm not. It's
the mighty Jagraphus of the Holy Hadrojasic Maxa Rodenfo. Yay!
Are you sure?
Someone in the comments now, if I'm watching this live, someone's in the comments probably going, "No, James, you pronounced that last word wrong," but that's how it reads. Our Bad Wolf mention in this one is that Bad Wolf is one of the TV stations, and you also get a cameo appearance of the face of Bo. Talked about the script. Nick Briggs recorded the voice for the Jagraphess, but because he'd done the voice for the Nesting Consciousness, it was pretty much the same thing, so they didn't they didn't use it or didn't credit him for it. And obviously, as we talked about, there'll be a ripple from this story later on in the season. Like you say, some of the stories have got links to later on. But yeah, again, I sort of read that there wasn't so much on-set camaraderie amongst some of the actors on the set either, which is an interesting one.
In this particular story.
Story. Sorry?
In this story.
In this story, yeah.
Sorry, well, choose my "you're only young twice." What are you telling us? What are you saying?
Just that there was some. Simon Pegg described Christopher Eccleston afterwards as being a bit prickly to work with. I believe something along those lines.
I've not heard anyone say anything bad about Chris Eccleston to work with.
I think he's got a faulty implant thing going on there, if you ask me my opinion on this.
I am being manipulated by Max.
Most people say Chris Eccleston, he's happy-go-lucky, he's Mr. Laughs a lot. I think that's what most people tend to say about Chris.
But yes, that's what I had.
Right, well, let's get some scores on the doors.
Go on, Jason.
Okay, I'll go first then. As you took the introduction there, James, I'll happily score off first on this one. Okay, so not one of the highlights of the season. As we've already said, as we've come through here, I think it's not the worst episode. It's not the best episode. There's a couple of set pieces I think that work. I think the comedy scene, particularly in the medical bay, works. And I think it's interesting that they play with the concept of a companion going rogue on us. And I think it's interesting, but I think it's probably done slightly better somewhere else as we head further on, and we'll get to that one, so I won't spoil it. You're right. I think the characters of both Rose and the Doctor are coming together really well. It's a good guest cast, but there's just something lacking. Is it the script? Is it the direction? Don't really know, but I can't put my finger on it like yourself. P-Bal, just something about this that just says it's the middle of the season mediocre story. So for me, I am going to be scoring a 6.
Ooh.
So, no, okay, no.
Just don't.
Oh no, I just it's mediocre and 6. End of the World got 6 as well. Pity End of the World, folks.
But again, I think this is a bit like that. I think this is a bit like that story. And
End of the World was the pinnacle of mediocre.
I didn't say that. You're putting words into my mouth now. All I'm saying is I think 6 is a very reasonable score for what this is. It's not setting the world on fire. It's not bad television. It's one that that it doesn't stand out amongst some of the crowd around it.
Okay. So anyway, James, do you think this is mediocre and worthy of 6?
I do sadly think this is mediocre. I forgot to say the original title was Adam, or the companion who couldn't. So it was supposed to be all based on Adam, but it didn't sort of end up that way. I think there's a lot of interesting elements, and I can pull out the bits that I like. But I think you're right, P-Bal, in the fact that there isn't something overarching about this episode that you would say this is the one with this, because I think there's too many sort of tiny elements. And I like the satire about media, and as you say, Jason, it's quite strange that we're now in this world now. If you look at anything around American politics for the last 4 years,
and it's only going to get worse, James. It's only going to get worse.
It's been, media dominated by one giant piece of meat. I think there's some really interesting bits, and I think again it's nice to see a different take on the companion from what we're used to. But all of those elements don't quite mesh together in a good way. It's a kind of ploddy script which is going along whilst Adam's off having his chip put into his head. So, yeah, it's not the worst story in the world, but it's certainly not in the same caliber as some of the others in this series. So I scored it a very middle of the road 5.
Thank you for your score.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think I'd pick anything from the first couple of years. First new couple of years as being below par, really bad, and anything really gets bad that quickly. But yeah, there isn't a spark for me here. And okay, I didn't mind watching it. I'd say it's sort of condemned with praise here. It's completely sort of average. So I also awarded Doctor Who and The Long Game. Which means Doctor Who and The Long Game. Tragedies, we got them. It's rock bottom, 16 points.
Oh.
It's a new low for the season. It's not a new low for Talking About, but it's a new low for the season.
That would have scored better.
It is good. I mean, like I say, there are elements in it that are really clever. It just doesn't come together, really. It's odd.
It's strange, even with I know a lot of people at the time were a bit skeptical about Simon Pegg's performance, but I like Simon Pegg's performance.
Yeah,
I think it carries it.
Nothing wrong with it. Nothing wrong with it.
I think it's good, and it takes a lot to peddle a role like that, where you just sort of in monologue for a lot of it, and you just you're just trying to hold with that, but it just doesn't quite click.
No.
Anyway, thank you very much, gentlemen.
Yes, thank you. Pleasure as always.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Don't forget to comment, write along, do all those exciting things, like, subscribe, notify, put beacons on the coast. I don't know. We'll see you soon.